come to Sir Ian Duncan Smith.
Mr. Speaker, I'm grateful. So much has already been said, I don't intend to repeat it much. But I just want to say that it is a sad day for all of us. It's tragic news, bringing to the end a remarkable career spanning 70 years, endless prime ministers and endless leaders of the opposition too. But for those 70 years, Her Majesty carried out her duties with charm, humility, not often mentioned, real humility, and also endless humour. She was quite remarkable in a way, and she learnt that from somebody that we haven't mentioned today, her father, who in his own way, someone who never expected in a way to be the monarch, who suffered a very significant problem in a speech impediment, and yet he showed her that it was possible to rise above the challenge and to deliver your service to your country at an incredible time. And that service and duty, there is no question she learnt at the knees of her father, overcoming his own difficulties and putting his country and their service first, something quite often forgotten about. And a couple of things that come to mind, because in fact so often we've taken Her Majesty for granted. We expect her to be there. The way the crowds, whenever anything is good or bad in our country, they gather at Buckingham Palace, whether she's there or she was there or not there. They gathered. It was almost as though they could touch the railings and draw some succour or some support or some sort of mystical help. And there they were again last night in pouring rain outside Buckingham Palace. Well, quite often in all of that, Mr. Speaker, we often forgot that she was also a human being with her own family issues and problems. And I remember particularly during that period when two of her sons were facing marriage breakups, which were being widely reported in the newspapers, in the media, with everybody speculating in public about all that was going on. I wonder how many in this House could ever have borne something like that in such public domain, such a sad tragedy for their mother. And then, to top it all, Windsor Castle burns down, a place she loved deeply and felt responsible for. And nobody seemed to take her in a way into consideration until when she approached a speech with an interesting cold, and she said that the year for her had been her annus horribilis. I think the public stopped. We all paused and we realized, actually, that we had forgotten that we owe as much duty and service to her as she had shown us without complaint. I thought that was a remarkable moment, really, when the country came back from where it was to recognize that duty and service. And the other was when Diana, then Princess of Wales, tragically died in that terrible car accident. And everybody again gathered outside Buckingham Palace, and they demanded that the Queen should come. It got more and more shrill, with the newspapers banging on about how she had to come back. But there she was in Balmoral, trying to do what almost any single mother, grandmother wanted to do, which is to put her arms around her grandchildren, comfort them, and protect them from what she knew was going to descend upon them. And finally, when she came down, I grew to the realization that actually it wasn't that they were angry that she wasn't there. It was that the British public needed her there to be able to show their own emotion, as she was the focus for all of that. And when she came, everybody cheered and applauded because she was there, and now they could grieve properly because she was the focus for that grief. And of course we have anecdotes about what we did, and I remember when I had ceased being leader of the Conservative Party, it happens quite a lot, really. I I think she was pretty used to it, actually.
Yes.
But she kindly asked me to take leave of her officially, which I thought was pretty kind, really. As said earlier on, nobody else wanted me to do it, so it was decent of her to do it. I remember when I came to the palace and I was ushered into her drawing room, small personal sitting room, I was struck by two or three things. One was the two-bar electric fire, which had a very strange piece of cardboard cut out in the shape of flames, coloured with crayons, I suspect by somebody in the palace, yellow and red, surrounding the two-bar fire, which I thought was peculiarly dangerous, but notwithstanding that, I'm sure it had a purpose. The other one was the Tupperware radio sitting next to her, which I hadn't seen since my parents smashed their last one. And then she very sweetly asked me how I was, being clearly sympathetic about what had happened. And I just shrugged and said, "Well, ma'am, nobody died and I'm still here." Whereupon she roared with laughter, and the funny thing was, as she did, she paused, looking at me, not sure whether I'd actually made a joke or whether I'd not. I laughed too, and then she laughed again. Whether at me or with me, I couldn't figure that out. That was something to relish. And the other anecdote I just wanted to share with the House for a second was slightly different. It was when I was in one of those Privy Councils, and for some reason we were offered drinks to have at the end of the Privy Council. Didn't happen very often, so I took full advantage and ordered a whiskey. And while we had finished the Privy Council, she came round to talk to those of us in the Privy Council and chat. And she came to me, and like everybody else, nervous as anything, I stumbled through, and then I said, "Oh, ma'am, I remember I'd just been reading some stuff about one of Churchill's speeches, and I suddenly recalled something that he had said at the time. It was 1941, and President Roosevelt had sent a note over with the person that he had just defeated in his third election. And in it, as Churchill said, he had written in his own hand a verse from Longfellow. Now remember, in 41, we didn't know whether we would survive or not. And Churchill read it out, and I started to speak it, and she started speaking it as well. And I just want to share it with the House. It was, sail on, O ship of state. Sail on, O Union, strong and great. Humanity with all its fears, with all its hopes for future years, is hanging breathless on thy fate. She said it perfectly. She smiled slightly, and I did detect a little dampness in her eye, and then she moved on. And in a way, it suddenly struck me that that was exactly her. She was the ship of state. We look to her for everything, good and in difficult times. She loved the Union with a passion. And she loved Scotland, I think probably most of all. The track was that was who she was. She was that ship of state, and somehow we have too often taken her for granted. But she has never complained, and she always gave us service. And now for that union of hearts, if the House would indulge me, I want to quote from W.H. Auden with a few changes. Stop all the clocks, cut out the telephones, prevent the dogs from barking with a juicy bone, silence the piano, and with muffled drums bring out the coffin, let the mourners come. She was our north, our south, our east and west, our working week and our Sunday rest, our noon, our midnight, our talk, our song. We thought that love would last forever. We were wrong. May God bless her and keep her and hold her in her hands. And may we bless the royal family. God save the King. Yeah.
I'm now going to bring Sir Geoffrey Donaldson in, but can I just warn others that I would hope to get so many in today that please, if we can use up to 3 minutes after Sir Geoffrey Donaldson. Sir Geoffrey.